from the previous discussion about Brazilian infrastructure, our next session will focus on an area that is key to ensuring decent living standards, its basic sanitation. Just under half of Brazilians today are without sewage removal, and about 35 million don't have access to clean drinking water in their home. The issue is now a political priority, and there is a target for the country to reach universal coverage of sewage and water by 2033. And following reform of regulation under the previous government, there is now much greater scope for private sector involvement. So with me to debate the topic, I have André Pires, who's the Chief Financial Officer of Aegea Saneamento, Veronica Sanchez de Cruz Rios, who is the President Director of the Agência Nacinal de Águas e Saneamento Básico, the national regulator, André Salcedo, who is the CEO of Sabesp, the São Paulo State Water Utility, and Schramm, who is Executive Manager at FGV Projetos. Before we start the discussion, Charles is going to open with some remarks for us about the topic. Please.
Thank you, Michael. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's been with great pleasure that I have accepted to be part of this event organized by Financial Times. Fundação Getúlio Vargas is a private foundation that has been internationally recognized for its academic excellence and innovative methodologies by promoting studies and research on Brazil's economic and social development. We advise public, private, and third sector organizations. We seek solutions for strategic matters focused on national development, observing social issues, and sharing knowledge linked to economic growth and sustainability. And mainly, in the sanitation sector, we have considerable expertise having worked on the elaboration of sanitation plans, support for companies in adapting to the new sanitation regulatory framework, and studies and projects modeling for public and private partnerships. For example, the recent launched program for 16 cities in the state of Paraná with $220 million of expected investments. The fight against inequalities is a core challenge in Brazil. Providing quality public services is one of the most effective ways to address this challenge. The provision of sanitation services stands out for its high impact in improving quality of life. Access to basic sanitation is a fundamental human right. However, Brazil still faces a high deficit in providing this public service. According to the National Sanitation Information System, potable water supply service reach no more than 85% of the Brazilian population, and sewage collection services are only available to less than 56% of the population. Significant investments combining public and private resources are necessary to offer these services to all Brazilian citizens. Brazilian Congress in 2020 passed a new legislation in this area, the new Sanitation Framework Law. I would like to address 4 items of the new law that can boost investments in the sector. The universalization of services goals, strong regulation, more competition, and better operational efficiency. The current legislation in force sets goals of 99% coverage of potable water supply services and 90% coverage of sewage collection and treatment services by December 2033. It means we have only 10 years to address the deficit and universalize sanitation services. There is no doubt that sanitation will be a priority in the next decade. The technical capacity building of regulatory agents is a significant challenge. the new legislation allocates new responsibility to the National Water Agency, ANA. As a federal agency, ANA has the legal framework to define the regulatory reference of the industry, harmonize regulation, and contribute to the qualification of subnational agents from a technical point of view. However, the road to achieve these goals presents several challenges. The improvement of water and sewage collection and treatment services coverage, the mitigation of water shortage and distribution losses, and the study of necessary investments to structure projects efficiently and effectively. Needless to say that the expansion of sanitation in Brazil brings several benefits to our economy, such as reduced health costs and increase in work productivity. Enhancing sewage collection and treatment in Brazil is crucial for improving public health and the environment. Brazil can create jobs and economic opportunities by investing in this area and boosting its global competitiveness and reputation. Additionally, the new law seeks to promote competition in the sanitation sector. The delegation of sanitation services must be done as a public concession. In the last 3 years, the industry has contracted approximately $11 billion from the private sector. Also, there is the search to increase operational efficiency, which includes reducing operating costs and physical and commercial losses. Attention to the ESG agenda among the operational efficiency topics is of utmost importance. Greater efficiency in providing sanitation service has huge positive social and environmental impact. Ultimately, public and private partnerships can bring together the strengths of both sectors, creating a more sustainable and effective system. All new sanitation projects will help to improve public health, protect the environment, promote economy development, and achieve sustainable development goals. Despite challenges and regional disparities, Brazil has made progress in improving water and sanitation services after implementing the new sanitation framework law. The sector's importance is undeniable. I am confident that our country will achieve its goals. I want to be part of this transformation, and I invite everyone to be part of it and be protagonist in this process of making Brazil a country that takes pride in universal sanitation. With these brief words, I trust I've got your attention for the discussion we are about to have with the heads of the 3 most relevant players in this area. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for those opening remarks, Charles. And we've heard then that around half of the Brazilian population don't have sewage removed from their home, and about 15% don't have piped drinking water that's clean into the home. So why is the provision of water and sewerage services so low in Brazil? What are the difficulties that make it so hard to get the infrastructure into people's homes?
Well, if I may start, it's a pleasure to be here with all of you. I think one of the main things is that Brazil, as you all know, is a big country with different biomes. We have the Amazon region, we have Northeast, which has lower supplies of water. And so these differences also make it difficult to reach water for population. Also, we have federal states, so we have 3 levels of the federation. We have the union as the federal government, state and municipalities. We have more than 5,000 municipalities which are responsible for giving access to water and sanitation in Brazil. So this complex federative arrangement in Brazil also establishes some challenges in order to advance the access of water and sanitation. And this is one of the objectives of the new regulatory framework, which is enable regional projects to supply the services, gaining scale and also scope and efficiency. So this is one of the objectives that we may reach with this new legislation in Brazil.
And on top of that, I think sanitation, water and sanitation in general, didn't get much attention of the regulator since until 2007, that we had the first regulatory framework established. Then again, on 2020, it's been revised, and in a better way, aiming to attract private capital to the sector. So what I think is Brazil has different challenges depending on the region, and what is being in discussion is that either the solution is either private or public. In my view, it's a combination. So you have to cooperate in order to put in place the infrastructure needed to deploy and grant and make sure that we'll have the universalization of the services throughout the country. And that being said, I believe the sanitation bill established in 2020 helps to bring private sector to the game, aiming on accelerating the deployment of infrastructure. But we'll also have to think about the smallest municipalities that doesn't have the structure, neither the planning to foresee these projects and bring private capital. So we need to think broadly as a region and try to combine economically feasible cities with non-economically feasible to grant it. And in addition, the governments, not only the municipalities, the states, and also the federal level, should work to establish partnerships in order to put money and make those municipalities feasible. So I think it's a combination of solutions that has not yet been put in place, and we need to accelerate it.
Yeah, if I may add, I mean, if you look at the development of Brazil infrastructure in the last 25 years, I think Brazil evolved significantly in mid-90s to late 90s by privatizing the telecommunication services. Right after that, the electric utility services, distribution, generation, transmission, and toll roads were part of this drive towards improving infrastructure. Sanitation is a rather different type of structure. It's much more fragmented. As Veronica mentioned, we have 5,000 municipalities in Brazil. Constitutionally, the municipalities are the ones responsible for providing the service for its population. So in putting together a framework, this definitely helps in a way advancing this so much delayed process in terms of infrastructure. In addition to what my colleagues mentioned, traditionally the funding that was used responsible to finance the development of sanitation have always been public, either through local state-owned banks or multilateral agencies. So it's very important that the capital markets play a role in also helping the funding of this project. I think this has started to happen a few years ago. Is still, I would say, developing, not as deep as what let's say the market needs. But as being a capital-intensive type of activity, it's very important that an array of investors participate in this process to fund this growth. Not only public funds, multilateral agencies, local capital markets, international capital markets. So there is an array of potential providers of funding that have the interest to participate. The sanitation law helps to organize and gives a better let's say, legal security for these providers of funding services. And it's up to us as well to organize ourselves to be able to present the opportunities to these investors.
Are there any estimates for how much investment is required to meet this goal of near universal coverage by 2033?
If I may continue here, it's all the estimates that we see, they varied between 800 billion reais, 1 trillion reais. I mean, it's very difficult to estimate. But this would be only, I would say, in investing in increasing the network of sewage penetration, for example, or potable water, not to mention potential additional needs that are related to grants, that are related to payment for states that eventually decide to privatize their state-owned company. So probably the right answer is above this number that I mentioned, potentially, I think.
Charles, do you have any idea about what the split will be for this amount of investment? Is it mostly public, mostly private? Will there be a big role for multilateral institutions?
I believe we will have a few of all of those. For example, right now we are helping and studying projects for more than 240 different cities in Brazil. And some of those projects should be financed by our development bank, BNDES, some private institutions, and we believe that the capital markets are being prepared to offer as well some opportunities to finance those projects. And the size is amazing, $200 billion. That's the number expected to 2033 in size of investment.
If I may add some more information, in the past years, we have increased the rate of private investment in sanitation area from 6% in 2019, if I'm not wrong, to more than 20% now in 2022. So it's a big increase of private investments in this area. And also, if we compare to other sectors of infrastructure, sanitation area was at the back of the line. So in first, it was the oil and gas sector, transport sector, telecom, and now sanitation in the past years have been at the top rate of investments in infrastructure in Brazil. Also in order to advance to the universal access and universal coverage in Brazil. And if I may compare to other sectors, in telecom and energy, we have reached almost all population in Brazil. We have like rates of 99% access in the past 20 years of investments. So that's the gap. We want to reduce this breach in the next 10 years. We don't want to take 20 years, we have to take 10 years to bridge this gap. And also, I've been seeing some companies from the energy sector going into the sanitation sector. We have been seeing sovereign funds and other capital market getting in Brazil and studying the project. So it's a very important movement that's happening in this sector in Brazil.
So it sounds like there's been a big increase in private capital going into the sector.
Yeah.
In the UK, where I'm from, there was a big push for institutional investors to invest in infrastructure. But one problem was that those private sector investors, they didn't want to take on the risk of construction for new projects, for greenfield projects, as they're called. Is that the same in Brazil? Is the private sector staying away from new projects? And do they tend to buy existing assets?
I don't see that.
What we've seen so far is that the private sector has a lot of appetite to participate on new projects. Aegea has been leading a company on that side, but also funds, international funds, Canadian funds, and elsewhere, other companies been participating on those new auctions, new contracts, and even the privatization of companies. So I believe that the sector is one of the most attractive overall. Brazil has some very interesting regulatory model that grants revenues and a proper return to the money invested. The thing is, I think, mixing with the first question, I think the bottleneck is structuring good projects. So once you have a good project structured, there's a lot of appetite in the market to put money on.
Yeah, I think Brazil has a very unique combination, which from my point of view, I'm not sure that there is anything like what we are living right now in the sanitation market. First of all, the social, environmental impact, the purpose of the sector, that is to bring health, quality of life, dignity for a population that does not have access, as you mentioned in the beginning, Michael. The second very important pillar is the fact that there is a market of 100 million people that are not being serviced by anyone. So it's not a question of disputing a market that is already there, right? So it's an infrastructure with growth, with significant growth. So that by itself brings a lot of interest from all kinds of investors, not only impact funds, ESG related funds, but traditional equity or fixed income fund that want to invest in a business, let's put it like that, that brings a purpose and has very interesting returns. And when you think about the infrastructure that is necessary to put together, obviously it is again a capital intensive business, but if you think about on a commercial point of view, you are bringing along a customer that does not have any type of service. And once you connect this customer, he becomes a paying customer, he becomes a client that you're gonna serve for 30, 35 years, which is normally the length of the contract. So it's a very powerful combination. In the developed countries, everything is already universalized. So we're talking about a pure infrastructure business. In our case, it's an infrastructure business with a commercial upside, in a sense that you're bringing additional customers to your network.
And if I may add something, the project that Sanepar, the state-owned company, just launched last month, the auction is an international auction, and we already know several international companies are looking to participate in that. The auction should happen in July, and not only the Brazilian companies are interested in, but as well some international companies. Then this is quite important and shows how much appetite the market has.
Would that be the first time that a foreign operator could win a concession?
Or could join efforts with our local companies as well, no? Do a kind of a new concessionaire, a joint venture, some international investors. Then I really believe, and Aegea here has experience on that, and other companies as well. Then I'm so pleased because we have the federal regulator here, the most important and bigger company, public company is Sabesp, and Aegea, now the largest sanitation from the private sector. And we are all sitting together and discussing market opportunities for the future.
So we've discussed that there was new regulatory framework introduced in 2020. So what are the main elements? Veronica, I believe you worked on its drafting. Could you maybe tell us what the main changes were that it brought about?
Okay, first we made a broad diagnosis. I think it took us like a year and a half, hearing everyone in the country which was responsible for sanitation. Then in 2018, the first legislative proposal was presented to Congress, and then, well, it took like 2 more years to be approved in the Congress. But the discussions in the Congress were very rich. We hear from all. And then the main point of the diagnosis was a very different regulation from the subnational agencies. So that brings higher costs of any company to get in Brazil and study different, like 90 different kinds of regulation from local agencies, regulatory agencies. So one thing was establish standard parameters for regulating this infrastructure in Brazil, which is now a competency of National Water and Sanitation Agency in Brazil. The second point was to increase competition for this market. So we have a very closed market. More than 76% of the services were being served by public-owned companies. Now we have a significant increase of private companies getting in this market, but that was because we had like a definition in the law that public companies could offer these services without a competition, without a bidding. So it was like easier for a public company to get in the municipality and offer these services without any kind of competition. And the new legislation establishes the mandatory need for competition to access this market. That's, I think it's like the most relevant change in the legislation. And also have good projects in order to give access to low-income population. So we have established regional projects which combine richer and poorer municipalities, and also we established like social tariffs, which is a very important thing in Brazil because we have still a significant part of the population we have no access, and they need to have access to this service in a tariff which they can pay. So we established like the existence of social tariffs, and that this population can pay these tariffs. And in a good modeling, in a good project, this is combined with the proper revenues for the investors. So these are, I think, the three main objectives of the new legislation, which have been attended in past years. And I hope all the new projects and all the new contracts that are being prospected could also reach these goals.
So the new government has said that it wants to make some changes to the regulatory framework that was introduced in 2020, and it seems their goal is to give a greater role again, or reinforce the role of state-owned companies. There were a couple of decrees that were issued earlier this year, although Congress has vetoed some elements of it. But it does seem that the government is working to try and get some of these alterations through in another way. What are these main changes that the current federal government wants to introduce, and what impact do you think they will have?
Well, the changes established or proposed by the government, I think they cause a very negative reaction on the market and the players, investors, because it's a quite new regulatory framework. It was not yet tested, and it didn't have the time to understand. Every law or the regulatory framework can be improved, but as long as the new sanitation bill has been established, I think there was not enough time to understand the amount of changes that should be proposed. So I believe, in general, the message was not good. The Congress, by the lower house, has already vetoed part of it, and in my view, it was a sniper shot that really addressed the main problems. Basically, giving more time to non-feasible companies to again try to prove that they are capable of deploying the infrastructure. So looking on the client side, on the population side, that would delay the investments and will not grant that the universalization would be really feasible to be put in place by 2033. So that's one point that I think that the lower house was very successful on tapping. And the other one is a way of the state-owned companies keep their market for themselves by establishing direct services contracts with municipalities. There's another thing that goes against the competition and efficiency of the sector and would, in another way, delay the process of universalization. So I think both items were correctly addressed by the lower house. And the other parts of the decree, I think they tapped some gaps that were really left behind by the former decrees and the law. And I believe they do not make that much difference on the overall perception of the sector. That's my opinion.
And André, from the perspective of a private sector operator, what did you think and your company think of these proposals from the new government?
Yeah, well, I agree with what André mentioned before, but looking forward in terms of the real impact for the growth journey of the sector, we don't believe that there will be any significant impact. I think we are in the beginning of the process. We're still going to need significant investments and participations in the sector to bridge the gap in terms of sewage coverage and also potable water. So it is a question of adjusting these points that André mentioned in the Congress. But none of this, from our perspective, would, let's say, either delay or even, in a sense, damage or harm the investment process that is going on. There are significant opportunities in the sector that will come that will be driven by other institutions, by state governments, for example, by some municipalities that still have the possibility to put their contracts for bidding. So the process will continue, I think, regardless of these initiatives, from our perspective.
I have the same opinion, Michael. From my experience with our clients, even those from the public sector, they are still working on to achieve these goals. And they know this is really challenging. It's not easy in 10 years from some places from 0 sewage treatment to 9% sewage treatment. And of course, we don't like too much to see this instability, but still, we are a democracy and it happens. Some discussions, some drawbacks, but even the public sector that is in charge of the sanitation, they are working hard to achieve and in many aspects to open opportunities to receive private sector investment.
So it sounds like these proposals from the government to amend the regulation was badly received. Was it even badly received by the state-owned companies operating in the water sector, would you say?
On our side, it doesn't change a thing, because we already had our goals very well established, and we'll be able to deploy and deliver the universalization by 2033. Right now, what we've been working so far is how can we anticipate those targets. Then the overall planning of the company and the states on move on the privatization has not been affected by the decrees. So it's basically we've been following with all that's been foreseen with the new government, and those decrees would not change anything on our planning.
And the government's argument seems to be that the role that the private sector can play in reaching the universalization targets was too optimistic, and that's why they wanted to make these changes. Do you think there are any areas in the 2020 regulatory framework that can be improved or should be tweaked in order to help reach those goals?
You know, one of the things that this decrease ended up adjusting, which from, I think, everybody's perspective was something that is positive, is to allow PPPs to go up to 100% of revenues, right, for the public companies. From our
Was that for public-private partnerships?
Yeah, the PPPs,
Yes.
the public-private partnerships. From our perspective, I mean, our objective is to help in the process of reaching the universalization goals. If it is through a full concession or through a PPP, I think we'll be playing our role. For Aegea's point of view, the business model of the PPP is an efficient business model as well, one is well structured. It all depends on the way it is structured, but the experiences that we have so far are very positive. So the Sanepar transaction that Charles mentioned is an example of that potential help and collaboration between public and private. The two PPPs in the state of Ceará that Aegea recently won, additional 5 million people that will be benefited from more investments in sewage, is another example. So working together as well is a way to reaching the common goal. So taking out the 25% limit, I think, was positive. I think everybody, in a sense, agreed with that.
And on top of that, not only they will draw the limit, but they also they are allowing the government, the central government, to provide guarantees on PPPs.
Yeah,
as long as PPPs, they are mostly a credit relationship between the state-owned company or the municipality company and the private service provider. Once you have a better guarantee structure, that will allow to unlock a lot of projects that would not be feasible without this structure. So
Absolutely.
I think mixing the withdrawal limits with the providing of federal level guarantee has a lot of potential to accelerate on accelerating this process of more PPPs coming to market.
So it sounds like the proposals weren't all bad.
Exactly.
And you mentioned the privatization process of Sabesp. So just to put it in context for members of the audience who don't follow the sector, it's the largest water and sewage company in Brazil.
Yeah, it's a third or fourth largest in the world.
And so what's the latest on the privatization process? So you already have a stock market listing, but the São Paulo state government still owns a majority of shares. And what's the time frame for the full privatization?
That's a good question. The government has been saying he wants to finalize the project by the 2024. So we've been working with the government to structure and analyze the models. The government recently established a contract with the World Bank, the IFC, to study different models and understand the best scheme or levers of value that can be tapped on this process, aiming on accelerating universalization, reduce tariffs if possible, and aligning with municipalities' goals and externalities for those municipalities and the population throughout this process of privatization. So what I believe is a feasible time frame. So thinking about having it done by next year, you have this year to study, to align with the municipalities, those targets, those alignment levers, such as investments, anticipating investments, and providing grants to those municipalities. And basically, what I've seen so far, that's very feasible to have it done by the end of next year.
Due to climate change, we're already seeing more extreme weather patterns, and of course, that involves water. In the north coast of São Paulo, there were disastrous floods this year, with not only in Brazil but elsewhere, but there have been more cases of drought. So what is the water sector doing in Brazil to have adaptations in order to mitigate the impacts of climate change?
Wow, that's
A lot of things.
wow. How much time do we have?
Are there any real standout projects that show
well,
this is what we're doing to ensure supply or make sure or reduce the risk of flooding?
I think the basic phrase would be we have to think on circular economy. So we deal with a whole the cycle of water. So in Sabesp, and I know the Aegea has been doing the same, we've been focused a lot on preserving the water streams, investing on preserving and reforestation. Sabesp is responsible for more than 44,000 hectares of water, and the watershed is 9,000 hectares, and the forestry is 35,000 hectares to be preserved in order to guarantee water security for the metropolitan region of São Paulo. We've been working with sludge treatment and changing the way of seeing the sludge more of energy recovery option than of something to be treated and sent to landfills. Energy generation throughout the operation using sludge, biogas, and other opportunities, and also the reuse of water to industry, cleaning the streets, and many other options that we have, even to send it back to the water stream. So there's a lot of potential of being more effective and understanding the cycle of water of a whole, and seeing how can we be more efficient on the use of water, using energy to clean the water, to extract the water and clean the water and distribute it, and also use all the byproducts of the sludge and the sewage treatment to produce energy used for agriculture, and also water reuse throughout the cities and also agriculture. Basically, that's it.
Just adding, it's a combination of that, but just two aspects that are important that we are focusing on is the recovery of some river basins. There's a project that we're doing together with the BNDES to recover a couple of river basins, one in Rio, and another one in the Pantanal, in this Mato Grosso do Sul area, and also efficiency in using the sludge and producing byproducts from sludge such as fertilizer, bricks, or generate energy as well. So there's a series of initiatives. Brazil is a very large country. You have different, I would say, different types of regions where you have more difficult to get water. You have abundance of water. We operate, for example, in Manaus, Águas in Manaus, which there is not a problem. Water is not a problem. So it depends on the region that you operate, how you deal with these situations. But clearly, it's an issue that the company has to deal on a daily basis.
If I may add some more information, we have, I think it's important to mention, this year in March, it happened here in New York, the United Nations Convention on Water. It was the first in almost 50 years. And it was a relevant call for attention from anyone, for all United Nations members, and from Brazil too, in order to accelerate the Water Action Decade agenda, which sanitation is one of the main topics. And this is related to all these investments in sanitation in Brazil, and also the consciousness that we must have in order to have water security. And in Brazil, our agency is responsible for also establishing the parameters for operating hydropower infrastructure in Brazil. Now we have all the reservoirs, and it's the first time in 10 years that we have all the reservoirs with more than 80% of water. This is very important in order to avoid possible lack of energy in our system, and also to avoid a crisis such as what happened in São Paulo in 2017. And now, so we have to balance all this climate change impacts in Brazil, not only to avoid severe droughts, which happen recurrent in past years, but also excess of water. So all this combination of innovations that were mentioned here by André from Sabesp and from Aegea are establishing our regulatory standards. So all these innovations can be put in the contracts and the new contracts in order to address these investments in innovation, reduce losses of water, in order to have a more sustainable treatment and relationship with water, concerning that it's a combined cycle. And so we are looking forward to establish these standard parameters in order to improve this system as a whole.
During this previous session about infrastructure, we discussed the current government stance where it wants the public sector to play a greater role in investments, especially this is the case in basic sanitation. But do you think that the signals the government is sending out around this, about changing rules or looking to revise privatizations, does that risk scaring away foreign investors from the sector?
I don't believe so. Of course, we need to have clear message, but we are receiving some clear message from the Congress saying that we improve our framework environment, and we should keep this achievement and go forward. And I believe we will do it. And as I said, even the public companies are trying to be better. Really, right now I have clients from the south of Brazil to the north of Brazil, 8,000 kilometers difference, and then both are really worried to be ready to offer a better quality service, and to offer in a coverage that the goals should be achieved. Then I really think we are going forward. And I would like to add, I was talking with Veronica, the importance of a strong agency, a regulatory agency, is key for private companies. They will be more comfortable to understand the rules and seeking governance on that. And Ana has an amazing job and they are doing at subnational agents, because André told us we have several different cities, 5,000 cities, and several different subnational agents, and they need to understand the core and to standardize, to have a standard way to work. And I think Anna has a great job and is doing right now to achieve that.
Thank you. We have time for a question from the floor. Would anyone like to pose a question to our panelists? If so, please say who you are and the organisation you're from. Do we have anyone? No. Well, I have a question for André of Sabesp. I live in the city, and whenever you go past the river Diete on a hot day, you smell it before you see it. Okay. It's even with the car windows up. But on the Pinheiros River, it seems like that's been cleaned up, and there's a lot less pollution, it smells less. What about the Diete? Is that part of your responsibility?
Not only mine, but it's a responsibility of the government and also Sabesp and also the municipality. And given that, we've arranged a group and we launched the project, it's been a month so far, called Integra Tietê, Tietê Integrated. In order exactly to get the experience of Pinheiros and roll it over to Tietê. It's a 5-fold bigger challenge, but I think with the experience that we had in Pinheiros, the good knowledge generated by the project, we can deploy these investments in the Rio Tietê, and we are aiming to clean from Pinheiro River upstream of Rio Tietê in 4 years. So probably when we visit throughout the next 4 years, you'll see the river improving. We've already started advancing on sewage collecting. Basically in Guarulhos City, they had roughly 0 sewage treatment until 2019. And we have advanced that we'll probably reach 50% by the end of the year, or maybe the beginning of next year. And that will help a lot on giving the life back to Rio Tietê, hopefully.
So on the Tietê, if I drive past it in 4 years' time, it won't stink?
That's our mission, yeah.
Okay, I'll hold you to it.
Okay, help me out.
Yeah. Do we have any questions from the audience? No, well, in that case, I'd like to thank our panelists who had this really interesting conversation about one of the areas of infrastructure that is most vital for, as you mentioned, decency, good living standards and dignity for all those Brazilians who don't yet receive those services. So I'd just like to say thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.